coming back to You're All Doomed, the podcast that is creating Jason, Friday the 13th, Part 13, as you listen. I'm Production Baby Greg.
And I'm Animal Wrangler Brian.
And this scene begins the next morning when the construction crew discovers the bodies of the 5 Chucklehead college kids that were murdered by Jason overnight. Delaplane is immediately informed and tells the crew to clean it up, dispose of the bodies, and act like nothing happened. So it's good that Jason didn't, cut one kid in half and then run around the camp with half of their body trailing blood everywhere. It's fairly contained, and, other than, having to find Brandon's head, it's pretty easy to, wipe this stuff down.
Well, you underestimate Jason's arm strength because there's nothing left of Brandon's head.
Oh, his head exploded. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, I thought it simply got knocked off. Damn.
What this scene really does is paint an even clearer picture that Delaplane is up to no good. And even now that he knows something is clearly going on at the campsite or his construction site, he's determined to just keep it quiet so he can continue with his work and finish his project. Later that morning, we see Megan and Ginny walking into the Camp Crystal Lake police station. And before the door even closes behind them, the deputy that's sitting at the desk tells Megan that 5 kids had been at a bar the night before and did not return home. So immediately, red flag is raised for Megan, and she decides to go investigate.
Megan and Ginny arrive at this bar, and it occurs to me that we haven't come up with a name for this establishment.
We have not.
I would imagine it's something more creative than O'Houlihan's or something like that. The Captain's Pub.
Well, let's see. It's in Crystal Lake, but we can't have everything. It can't just be like the Camp Crystal Lake bar.
No. What about the Tomahawk? A nod to the nearby Tomahawk Lake.
Possibly.
The Cable Knit Sweater. We could have it called Tina's, and it's like a little allusion to the fact that maybe, Psychic Powers Tina bought and owns a bar.
I was going to say Christie's.
Oh.
Like Christie's Place or something like that. And it could just be that the owner's name is Christie, or it is a nod to the Christies who used to own this place.
That seems a little grim.
Well, it could be the same Christies. It doesn't have to be a nod to the family that was killed.
Oh, so like Steve had a brother or a sister, and then they still live in the area, and instead of taking over the camp, they started a bar. Like that.
Let's go into a completely different line of business.
Yeah, but we still need a cook.
And a busboy, perhaps.
Perfect. All right. I like it. Christie's.
It seems weird that Ginny is kind of following Megan around, but Megan is very good about keeping the two things separate. So it's kind of like Megan's like, Ginny, you can ride with me, but when we get there, maybe stay in the car or stay outside or something. But I've got business to do. So it's not it hasn't turned into this Starsky and Hutch relationship where suddenly they're
yet
out. Right.
Car chase.
How's that for a timely reference? Or maybe it's more like Cagney and Lacey. Yeah. How's that for another timely reference? Heart to heart.
This is Mrs. H. She's gorgeous.
So anyway, Megan shows up at the bar, and the bar's not open yet, but the owner is there, and he's just kind of getting things straightened up. And he says that he remembers the kids from the night before because they almost got into a fight. And he also says that he overheard them talking about going to Camp Crystal Lake. So immediately Megan knows that it's pretty clear where they need to go to next.
Yeah, and I originally had the owner of this bar played by Keith David, but that makes no sense if he's a member of the Christie family.
Just make it David Keith.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
It's certainly better than my Jason Statham.
I remember them because they almost got into a fight last night, and then they went to the camp. We cut to Megan and Ginny arriving at the construction site, and Megan immediately hunts down her husband, John, who tells them that nothing unusual is going on. There weren't any kids here when the site opened in the morning. And as far as he knows, he's telling the truth because he was not present when the bodies were discovered. And by the time he got there to work that day, it had all been cleaned up. So he's kind of confused why they're there.
It's at this point that Delaplane shows up and tells Megan that, like, he's getting pretty pissed now. He feels like he's being harassed by the police. The first time, it was clearly an accident. The guy fell off the bulldozer or whatever it was. But these 5 kids that are missing, hey, there's no sign of 5 kids here. I don't know what you're talking about. So he's just like, stop. Just because a kid goes missing doesn't mean that they're here. So you're looking in the wrong place. Stop bugging me. And he's like, unless you find concrete evidence that something's going on, you're not allowed back here anymore.
And Megan agrees to leave. She doesn't want to get her husband in trouble. And I mean, his point is valid. They have, if there's no evidence of anything going on, then she really has no reason to be there. So they do take off.
Delaplane and John watch as Megan and Ginny drive away into the distance, and John takes a walk back to his trailer where his office is, and he's in his office for a little bit and he's doing some paperwork, and he hears some noise kind of like outside, and so he just kind of stands up and he peers through the blinds, and there's like a larger kind of sheltered area that has been constructed that covers all of the large construction equipment like the bulldozers and stuff. And inside that little kind of like garage area, he sees what looks like bodies, 5 bodies in particular, in body bags being loaded into the back of a van.
He ignores this and continues working.
As he's peering through the window, he's obviously concerned by this, but he looks off to the side and he sees Delaplane kind of supervising the loading of the bodies. He's supervising it from a distance, and he happens to turn around and sees John peering through the blinds of his trailer. So it doesn't take long for Delaplane to knock on the trailer of John's office.
He marches inside and basically bribes/threatens John into keeping this quiet, not saying anything. He'll give him, an extra share in the proceeds of the sale of these homes, or some sort of financial transaction, and reminds John that there are a lot of people depending on the revenue that the jobs are going to be creating here, and that the rich people are going to be bringing in. So, he can't do anything to disrupt this. And it basically backs John into a corner. And, Delaplane promises that he's going to take extra steps to eliminate whatever is going on here, because things are indeed getting out of hand. But they got to try and keep it quiet.
Later that afternoon, Megan and Ginny are understandably unconvinced that nothing is truly going on at the campsite. So they decide to do their own kind of like clandestine search of the outskirts of the campground and the construction site to kind of see what they can dig up, because they know that they can't get into the main area without getting hounded by Delaplane. So they're like, let's just kind of see what's going on the outskirts and see what we can uncover.
Ginny vaguely remembers the rough location of the shack that Jason was living in, which is some distance away because it was closer to the Packanack site. And so she and Megan begin a fairly long hike to get there. And during this hike, they begin sharing the experiences that they had both with Jason and what has happened to them since.
We do learn that Ginny never got closure on what happened to Paul. So that is why she's been following Jason's stories all this time, because, as us, the viewers, it's kind of left ambiguous to what happens to Paul at the end of part 2. And apparently for Ginny, she never got the answer either. So she has probably been doing her own research during this time, trying to find out, is he still alive? If he's not, where is his body? And that's certainly going to lead to a decades-long interest in what Jason has been up to.
Yeah, and that trauma and that lack of closure has also led her through a string of unsuccessful relationships. Her marriage failed, and she basically, her career as a child therapist is really what has kept her going and has kept her, even reasonably positive. But she's had a pretty sad life, and that's too bad. She clearly needs some sort of catharsis. This hits pretty close for Megan too, because it turns out that, she and Tommy didn't last long. Despite the bond that they shared through that harrowing situation, he still was a kid with a man with a lot of emotional trauma and mental health issues, and it just wasn't a sustainable relationship. And so that's sort of what led her to meet John, and his gentle, stable nature appealed to her, and kind of she's lived a much more conventional life.
Do you think John would carve Jason's name on the hood of the police car?
He'd carve the Delaplane logo.
The most interesting part of this walk is when Megan and Ginny decide to start comparing notes on what they know about Jason. Obviously, Ginny had her own experience, and then Megan had her own experience, but what happened in between them and what happened after Megan. And so there's a lot of kind of like, well, what did you hear about this? And did you hear about that?
Yeah, and it's kind of a good refresher of the series between parts 2 and 6. We find out a little bit. We're reminded of Higgins Haven. We're reminded of the spree at the Jarvis family home and the party house, and I feel like they would probably allude to the fact that somebody impersonated Jason for a time, but I would feel like that's an area of the canon that's glossed over, perhaps.
Yeah, I saw that as, to them, like they were aware that some guy went crazy and killed a bunch of people, but in terms of the details of the specific details of that being revealed to the public, and as far as like, oh, and he was dressing up like Jason and pretending to be Jason, like I don't know if that necessarily would have leaked. So maybe they would have heard rumors that this guy was impersonating Jason, but I see it more as like they're both aware that this guy named Roy went on a killing spree, and then as far as that is concerned, like they're not necessarily connected to their events, which is how it should be.
Yeah. And Megan would even say, we thought we took care of him, but, she would know that some things, Jason-related things, happened even after he was chained to the bottom of the lake. I feel like, again, they would probably be vague mentions of things like wiping out the entire graduating class of the high school. She wouldn't necessarily say that it took place in Manhattan, which, frankly, it didn't. So, and then, maybe even like, at one point I'd heard he'd been captured, but, you figure that Megan was, going through her police training and starting her married life and stuff. And so she may not have been as tapped in to the Jason stories at the time until she came back here. And by that point, they'd kind of shifted more into rumor than anything else.
That's true, because in Jason X, we know that he had been captured. And in terms of timeline, like, have we reached that date yet where he's been captured?
Wasn't it like 2008 that it was supposed to take
maybe
place?
Yeah, maybe. So that's kind of, as far as they're concerned, the end of Jason. He's been captured and potentially incarcerated somewhere.
And we need to
So-
leave that vague, because like if the events of Jason X truly happened, he'd be in cryo suspension right now and not running around as an old man. So I feel like, it would be best to just acknowledge that other movies got made, but maybe they weren't even really true. Enough time has passed from this conversation that Ginny and Megan reach the remains of Jason's old shack. And at this point, it's basically a pile of rubble.
The high chair is still there, though.
It's the one thing still standing. Yeah, it's collapsed in several places, and clearly it's no longer habitable. It's Jason is not there. I'm frankly surprised that they didn't clear it out after the crimes that happened there, but I guess nobody wanted to be in that area. I'm guessing that Pamela's head is not still there under the pile of crap, but yeah, it's no longer even a structure. But as they sift through looking for any sign that he's been there or anything, Ginny does see a leather satchel, and it looks fairly new. It looks like it's in good condition. So she opens it and finds the belongings of the plucky reporter that we met earlier. No one even has realized that she's gone missing, but this person's belongings are here laying on the remains of Jason's old shack. They figure this is a bad sign, and that they probably need to try and find out if anything has happened to this reporter. There's some contact information inside the bag, so they figure it's probably a good idea to go ahead and leave as the day is waning. They head back to regroup at Megan's house and figure out what their next move should be.
Now that the sun is starting to set, we're back at the construction site, and as Delaplane promised, he has asked for help to reinforce the construction site, and that is when a fleet of black SUVs pulls up with a trailer, and 7 intimidating commandos step out, and they immediately know who to go to, so they go to Delaplane for instructions, and he basically says, well, he actually admits that he thinks that it's Jason out in the woods somewhere. So he's giving them an actual person to hunt and tells them, do whatever you got to do to kill him. But most importantly, you got to keep it quiet, because this is a pretty small community. And if there's this huge firefight breaking out in the woods, they're not going to be able to keep that quiet for very long.
Yeah, so there's 7 people here, and on the trailer behind one of the SUVs is an ATV, so they'll have some vehicular mobility. But they're kind of a generic group of commando types. There might be some women scattered in there too, but it's like one of them obviously has like night vision goggles. One of them is carrying some outdoorsy type stuff like machetes and a rucksack full of wilderness equipment and a compound bow, that kind of thing. One guy, for some reason, has a metal detector, and another guy has an eagle on his shoulder.
There's one guy dressed as a professional wrestler.
One guy's just a firefighter.
William Refrigerator Perry's there for some reason.
Man, just think what Jason could do with a football on a chain. They deploy out into the woods, and we get a short montage of them scouting the area and maybe looking for some signs by which to track Jason. But night is fast approaching, so they have to hunker down and set up a secure position.
And this is all set to the theme of the A-Team.
This is a pretty good scene for them to reveal some of their character, and they're tough talking, arrogant jerks for the most part. They're kind of laughing about Delaplane and his concerns, and they're like, he's afraid that this one old dude is gonna cause all these problems. Like, we can take this piece of shit out, and they're kind of just they're definitely they're much more confident of their skills than they should be. But they are at least taking it seriously. They've got the ATV guy doing a quick recon of the perimeter. It's night has fallen, but he's got the headlights turned on, so he's checking things out, making sure that no one's lurking around nearby, and then they're setting a watch schedule, that kind of thing. So they are, they're being professionals, but they're kind of unpleasant.
I am happy to report that Creighton Duke is nowhere to be seen in the woods here.
We could make one of these guys his little brother, and he's, trying to avenge his beloved brother Creighton.
I love it.
The ATV commando is keeping touch with the base camp via a headset. We're back at the base camp, and we can hear the ATV in the distance, but we're hearing the transmissions to the radio, and it's sort of like all right, I'm gonna check one more place, and then head back. I'll be there in about, and it cuts out, and we then cut to a scene of the ATV now riderless, veering off into the shrubbery and tipping over, and we see the head with the headset drop into frame and roll away. Jason has decapitated the rider.
So R.I.P. to Commando Number 1. He was played by Liev Schreiber.
We're really blowing the budget on the acting talent this episode, this time. And that is, in fact, our only kill for this episode.
To find out what my commando outfit would look like, tune in next week to the next episode of
You're All Doomed.
Doomed.
Is it underpants?